Questions About War podcast production by Lynn and Dave. Episode 19, Part B, Axis of Evil. Chat GPT, here is a more polished and convincing version of the speech tailored for an Oxford debate audience. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, it is a pleasure to address you today, particularly in the presence of Radoslaw Sikorski, Poland's former foreign minister, with whom I have the privilege of sharing the stage for the first time. Poland has become a key member of the Democratic Alliance, not only for its military and financial contributions to Ukraine, but also for its strategic role in the broader information war, both internationally and within Polish politics, where recent elections centered around democracy and liberal values. We've just heard Neil describe the International Democratic Alliance as weak and divided, and I want to build on that while offering some clarifications. First, let's talk about Poland's position. Poland, a smaller nation, is not a global superpower, but it plays an outsized role in various alliances, and I'm keen to explore how Poland sees its place in the broader conflict and its relationships with the alliance of autocracies. Before diving into Poland's perspective, let me first address some of Neil's points. While I agree with much of what he said, I also believe some comparisons are unfair. Specifically, when it comes to comparing Europe's support for Ukraine with China's support for Russia. Europe has spent over 120 billion euros and counting of its own money on helping Ukraine. Meanwhile, China's relationship with Russia is transactional. China is actually profiting from its trade with Russia, filling market gaps and capturing sectors once dominated by Western consumer goods and cyber products. In this sense, China is gaining a geopolitical vassal while enriching itself in the process. So, from China's point of view, what's not to like? However, I agree with Neil that the sanctions regime is even more problematic than it appears. Dual-use goods are indeed flowing into Russia through Central Asia, as seen in the spike in European trade with countries like Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. But the reality is even worse than the statistics suggest. In many cases, goods aren't merely passing through these nations, they are being shipped directly to Russia under the guise of being in transit to Central Asia. This demonstrates just how weak and ineffective our sanctions are. Yet there is potential for us to do much better. The European Union has far-reaching legal authority over any entity that has ever engaged in transactions using the euro, just as the United States does with the dollar. Legally, we could establish a powerful sanctions regime that would punish anyone who has ever used these currencies for transactions. What is missing on our side is enforcement. While the U.S. Department of the Treasury employs hundreds of people to track global transactions, the EU has delegated enforcement to member states, many of which lack the capacity or the political will to take meaningful action. This is what must change. The easiest and most effective path forward is building a robust enforcement mechanism within the EU itself. On the matter of preparedness, there is some hope. A senior British commander recently told me that the UK estimates that Vladimir Putin will need at least 5 years to rebuild the army he had before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It will take a full decade to create an army capable of credibly threatening NATO. In this sense, Ukraine has bought us invaluable time, but the critical question remains, will we use it wisely? As for Poland, our most crucial role may be in the information war, particularly in reaching out to what is often patronizingly called the Global South. I recently traveled to Malaysia and the Philippines, where it is vital to explain the nature of this war in terms they can relate to. Colonialism wasn't just about Western Europeans dominating non-white populations. It was also about one European people oppressing another. It's easy to explain this concept in places like Ireland, Poland, or Ukraine, but countries in the Global South may not see it as clearly. That's where Poland has a unique voice. When we as Poles or Ukrainians tell the Global South that this is a colonial war, a war of imperial aggression, our message carries more weight than if it were delivered by Americans, the British, or the French. We have the credibility of having been colonized ourselves, and we can build empathy by framing Ukraine's fight as a struggle against modern-day colonialism. This is a narrative we should continue to push. Lastly, I want to offer a metaphor for understanding today's geopolitical landscape. The autocracies, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, are like drug cartels. They each control their own turf, but they have a common enemy in the rules-based international order, much like how drug cartels share a common enemy in law enforcement agencies like the FDA. Occasionally, these regimes do favors for each other, working together in subtle ways to undermine the international system. We are, in a sense, dealing with an international drug cartel, a network of rogue states united by their shared hostility to liberal democracy. In conclusion, while the challenges we face are immense, they are not insurmountable. By strengthening our sanctions, reinforcing our alliances, and engaging in a more effective information war, we can counter the autocracies that threaten the global order. And Poland, though a smaller player on the global stage, has a critical role to play in that effort. Thank you. ChatGPT, this version presents a more coherent and polished argument, making it suitable for a debate at Oxford. Please join us next time on Questions About War podcast.